So I'll first ask each of our panelists to introduce themselves. Then I'll ask each of them to respond to the organizing question, whose voices are we not hearing from? And then we'll open it up to yourselves. So Wendy, if you'd like to get us started, please.
Okay, hello, I'm Wendy Knight, and I guess I come here with a few hats on. I've got my own company, Early Nights Limited, where we've got a small portfolio of housing that we rent to mainly disadvantaged families. And we've got a couple of Airbnb properties that we want to look to housing disadvantaged families on a short-term basis. So we'd like to work with the other organisations. So if you need to house a family for a short period of time in England, because sometimes you might have to disperse a family from Scotland to England for a short period of time, come down to Early Nights Limited. Right, but I'm here really as head of operations at Glen, Gambling Lived Experience Network, and we're really about amplifying the voices of the lived experience, which I'm one.
Hello, I'm Stephen Yandu. I'm of the Alerts Group in Bet No More UK. I've been with Bet No More UK for about 8 years now, so I'm an individual with lived experience, the Safer Gambling Advisor and Senior Outreach Worker at Bet No More UK, and I'm also a core member of the Alerts Group, a group who, well, I'll be introduced formally shortly, but who engage with different support providers and actually assess, their level of treatment and actually, work in partnership to see how we can actually improve treatment. I've done some work around criminal justice, which I'll be speaking about shortly, of course, as well, but that's just a little bit about me.
Hi, everybody. My name's Amy Sweet, and I work for Gamble Aware. I'm part of the Evidence and Insights team, and we commission the National Gambling Support Network, which funds prevention, treatment and support services across GB. So our Evidence and Insights team are there to kind of support the understanding of gambling harms across GB. And I think one of our kind of key focuses over the last sort of 12 to 18 months has been, looking at different community groups and how different community groups need support for gambling harms. I think previously there's, when we think about research in terms of gambling harms, it's generally just focuses on people who gamble and not actually thinking about the different communities that sort of partake in gambling and what kind of support those community groups need, because we know that people experience different levels of harm based on the community they're from. So I think for us, it's been really important to look at those different community groups, and it's really helpful today to sort of talk about that in a bit more detail.
Thanks very much. So I'll ask each of our speakers to comment on the question that we've all come here to discuss. Whose voices are we not hearing from? So Wendy, if you'd like to start.
Well, some of you might be glad to hear that you're not hearing my voice. So you don't hear from Black women very often in this space. So Black women, I would say, are not heard in this space. And research shows that. I mean, I did some research with the Howard League recently, and they showed that women of ethnic minority are not well represented in the gambling and gambling harms discussion.
I echo that as well, Wendy. I was on that project with you. I'm proud to be in that project with you as well. But what I want to talk about is people who, with living experience as well, and with lived experience, have actually experienced the criminal justice system. So I work within the criminal justice system. I was working in mitigations and actual resettlement as well. But however, I took on a lead role working in 3 prisons across the southeast. That was Thameside, ISIS, and Belmarsh prisons. And what I found was between 2019 and June 2020, there was no provisions in place for people experiencing gambling harms. I will come across individuals who had offended who had committed offences to fund their gambling. However, none of this was considered during any judicial processes. It wasn't even taken as a mitigating circumstance, and they were more or less sent to prison, apparently to be rehabilitated with the same issue, and they came out of prison with the same issue too. something I want to mention about alerts is that we have individuals who are part of alerts, with different experiences and who've actually experienced the criminal justice system. There's a colleague of mine in alerts, Tracy. She's not here today, but she's somebody, who I wish was actually here because she can actually describe more in terms of the inconsistencies and the lack of provisions that they are and what that actually meant for her when she was experiencing gambling harms and she was, being subjected to, let's say, the criminal justice system. So I want to talk about that too. And I had a conversation with Claire during our lunch break, and we spoke about, the fact that, sometimes we don't actually consider young voices, people who are actually experiencing harms and not knowing that they're actually experiencing harms. And how do we support, let's say, parents, especially parents who've adopted children who may have different kind of traumas, to kind of help them navigate, some of the challenges that people present with. I think there's a lot to go on, really, but I'll leave it here for now and I pass it on to Amy.
Thanks, Stephen. And I echo what Wendy and Stephen have said. We know that women often don't come forward for support. We know the minority communities don't always come forward for support. I think there's a lot of stigma and shame around gambling, and many people feel unable to talk about their problems. And I think it was really interesting in Lauren's presentation earlier, there was something where she said that, someone hadn't come forward because they'd never been asked. And I think that's a really interesting point that was made, because I think there's so many groups that are experiencing other issues. So I've got a list here of all the different issues like homelessness, neurodiversity, violence and trauma, criminal justice, for example. These people are presenting in their system, as homeless or, within the criminal justice system, but no one's actually asked them if they're experiencing gambling harm. So I think there's a whole heap of people that we're not hearing from because that question isn't being asked. And I also think it's really worth adding affected others as well. So we know that there's lots and lots of people out there that are affected by somebody else's gambling, but they're not there then getting support themselves. And I think that's a huge part of the population that we should also make sure we're discussing today as well.
Okay. I'd like to invite anyone with questions for our panel to ask away, and online as well.
Hi, I'm Lisa and I'm the Service Manager for GamCare Scotland, delivering adult treatment support services. And what I'm asking you today is, how do we do this better? To actually, what can we do? What can we change as organisations to engage with ethnic minorities, women in particular, affected others? Because our data has shown that we're not reaching those people. And I just wondered if you guys had any ideas for us as organisations to do it better.
Thank you for your question. I think in terms of the approach we could use is we can actually use community champions if we actually wanted to target a group. But I would approach this issue in a less discriminatory way and not maybe target, that specific group. And we will find out that organically there's probably a group, that has been disproportionately impacted by their harms. I keep repeating this, I've repeated this over the years, is that we need to actually demonstrate care and interest and not allow fortune to actually favour those who actually find recovery or those who find support. We need to actually reach out to individuals more, and that we actually need to engage with services that have lived experience, that have that experience and that expertise, and basically find ways of actually working together as a collective to minimize and to kind of limit and prevent the harms, that people experience. I think that's important. There is something which I wanted to mention as well about the voices that we're not hearing, as Wendy mentioned, in terms of Black women are not really considered to basically be of a group that can experience any type of harms really, but it's been proven that they can disproportionately experience domestic violence and so on, and they can have basically children who are more likely to actually go through the criminal justice system and experience the criminal justice system. I was having a conversation with somebody the other day, a Black woman, and she was talking about her son's gambling, and her son's 35 and she doesn't know what to do about his gambling. We're Bet No More UK. We're based in Islington. This event was taking place in Islington, but she still didn't know where to turn. So I think as people, as a society, as a community, as experts, as practitioners, we could be actually doing more to reach out to people and not expect, any incentives in place. I think that should be a byproduct, or that should be a by-reward, but we need to actually show that genuine care and have that effort to actually want to make that change.
Okay, I'm going to talk about two things that we're doing. So Glenn is partnershiping with Fast Forward. Now, I'm 51 and I play rounders for England. And and what we're going to do is we're going to go out into the disadvantaged ends and play some family fun days around rounders. Now, if I said, come out to a family fun day about gambling, no one's coming from the black community, all right? But if I said, come out and play rounders, come out and play an activity, people come out. Now, my experience is that I've done some events in Middle England. And on one evening, we had 50 people come out to play rounders. And I thought, there's an opportunity to raise awareness about gambling and gambling harms here. So one of the things that I'm doing with like Fast Forward and some other organisations are family fun days in the disadvantaged ends. So we're going to play rounders. Rounders England are going to be supporting it, but we've got to get those families out from those disadvantaged. So they're not travelling anywhere because we're going to them with rounders. And when they're not playing in the rounders tournament, because we're going to break them up into teams, and when they're not playing, they'll be going inside to get educated around gambling and gambling harms. And then we're trying to sort of ask our community what research needs to be done now to help us with helping people with gambling addiction. We know through the COVID times that there's been a mass rise in black women gambling. And I'm surprised today I'm the only black woman here. Why is that? There is a stigma around gambling and gambling addiction in my community. So we're going to bring it to them in a different form. Sport is a way of getting people together to work as a team. It's very empowering when you can bring people who don't know each other together to play as a team, and they've got a common goal. So we're looking forward to that, doing that with Fast Forward in Scotland. But the other thing that I'm going to challenge you all, right? I don't know if you've anyone heard of liquid money? Black people's money is liquid money. Anybody? Okay. Right. Go on, Fran, tell me about it.
About how money...
Hang on.
Oh my God, sorry. Hello. Liquid money, as in black people's money, doesn't stay within the community. It slips through their fingers and is constantly going towards white-owned businesses and white-owned. And if you find it difficult to spend money in black-owned businesses because they're not always around you, so you have to travel a long distance to be able to spend the money there, right?
Fran, you listened. I didn't think you were listening to me. Nobody listens when I talk about liquid money. Now, so when I come out of my house, I've got to drive 2 miles. So I'm going to set you all a task. You've got to go and buy a pint of milk from a black-owned business. They need to look a bit like me. They can be a man or a woman, but you have to go and buy a pint of milk, right? Yeah, I don't care. Listen, I'm going to give you my email address, wendy.knight@glennetwork.org. I want you all to email me and tell me how many miles you had to drive or walk to get a pint of milk in a black-owned business. They have to look something like me, okay? Or Stephen, all right? Okay. When I come out of my house, I've got to travel 2 miles, but I'll go past 10 bookmakers, and I'll go past a whole host of shops. And therefore, I probably won't have any money left, or not very much to put into my own community. So Fran was right, liquid money. Liquid money. And look it up. It's a thing, and it's a systemic thing. So if you want, when you said, what can we do? It's about changing the system, giving people of colour more opportunities, and value. We've got a lot to offer in terms of disadvantage. I mean, I talk about my parents coming here, yeah? They didn't come here for the weather. They came here for the money, right? So we're always looking for the money. My parents came here and faced racism, no blacks, no dogs, no Irish, yeah? And so we've always been looking for the money. Whatever. We're not hiding it. We came here for the money. And gambling, for some people, gives escapism from racism. It gives hope. You know, if you can get that house with your mum by gambling, then you'll gamble for it, you know, because the system is set up for us to fail. So it's incumbent upon every one of you to change the system for us. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll just quickly add to that one as well. So I think, again, it's about how do you engage with those communities, and it's like it comes from lived experience. So what do those communities need? And I think where we commissioned a piece of research on women in relation to gambling, a lot of the women that we spoke to didn't associate with gambling. So they would say things like, oh yeah, we play bingo, or yeah, we play online slots. It's not gambling. But actually they were experiencing gambling harm. So it's thinking about, you know, if somebody said to a lady, you know, are you gambling? Well, no, I'm not gambling. But it's like, well, what are you doing? You know, are you playing slots? Oh yeah, well, I'm playing online slots. And it's thinking about how to start those conversations before people are, you know, already wanting to kind of shut them down. But I think also we fund several projects as part of our Community Resilience Fund. And a lot of that work has been going into very grassroots organisations who may not be necessarily working with people in relation to gambling harm, but are working with specific community groups and have noticed that gambling is coming up as an issue. And actually thinking about those people have already built the trust with that community. So they already know, you know, how to interact with them, what they need. And so that they can then link up with organisations who are gambling harm specialists, but then it's the community organisations that are having those kind of conversations and knowing how to best to interact with them. And so I think, as you were saying, Stephen, it's about that kind of community first approach as well is really important, and those community leaders. And I think in terms of, again, coming back to that stigma and shame thing, you know, if you went into a community and that community doesn't know you and they already are feeling very ashamed about their gambling, they're not going to want to talk to you. So again, it's how do you build that trust, and doing that through those community organisations, I think, is really, really powerful.
Any further questions? So something that was mentioned and comes up for fast forward a lot is that a lot of the research and a lot of the kind of conversations around how harms impact on affected others is focused on adults because that's who the research has been conducted with. And often the kinds of stories we hear from, and even in kind of lived experience organizations, there's often a focus on adults. So I guess something I wondered is if any of you have thoughts around how do we involve children and young people, or hear from children and young people in a way that's safe, that involves the safeguarding that's necessary, but that gives them a voice in these broader conversations.
So we've actually just commissioned a piece of research focusing on children and young people, and we're working with kind of specialist organisations that have got the kind of training and experience of engaging with young people, because obviously it's a topic that can be quite triggering, and obviously for a lot of young people, they might be experiencing gambling harm but not understand that harm that they're experiencing, or they might have a parent or carer. And I think there's from the sort of early research that we've done, there's obviously that concern around not wanting their parent to get in trouble, and that real kind of sense of ownership and needing to make sure that they stay safe. But obviously that's a huge burden on young people to carry. I think obviously the work that Fast Forward are doing around, building understanding in schools and actually what is gambling harm, how to recognise it, that gambling harm isn't just experienced by you as the person gambling, but also it could be experienced through a parent or carer or grandparent or sibling, and just having that awareness in school is hugely important. But I think again, a lot of the services now are kind of adapting to be able to provide support for young people, and I think there's a much better understanding of the impact young people have as an affected other, and I think there's a lot more support out there for affected others, because we know that for many young people there is an association with experiencing harm as a young person and then actually gambling as an adult. So again, it's understanding those relationships and those links, but also providing that support early on enough so that young people get the help that they need. But I think it's about just having that awareness and building that awareness from a young age. And I think, so again, the work that Fast Forward are doing is really fantastic in that space. But again, I think it's that having that awareness among sort of treatment providers for adults, that actually you might be supporting an adult through gambling harms, but do they have young people living with them, or are there young people experiencing harm, and actually making sure that then they're referred on to that support. So I think it's about making sure that question's asked early on by providers of treatment and support for adults as well.
Wendy, did you want to come?
Oh yes, please. I often think about children. I mean, my bag is that I'm a childcare practitioner at heart. I've worked with disadvantaged families and children and families all my life, really. And as a Show Start program manager, I developed 9 Show Start children's centres. Anyone know Show Start Children's? Yes, in Bradford, West Yorkshire, one of the most disadvantaged areas where index of multiple deprivation was really high there. And I developed 9 Show Start children's centres. So I talk to people like Red Card and people like that who do work with children face to face. And we have this conversation about that children are not the purse holders, right? So they don't have any power really in the family when you've got a gambler in there. The children don't have that much power because they don't have the power over the money. And so when I've been thinking about the white paper and affordability checks, I thought, you better not steal my idea, right? But I think there's an opportunity to have a Show Start approach. When I were managing teams in Show Start, we'd be going out, knocking on everybody's door and doing family support in that home. We would go inside, we'd look at the sleep environment, we'd look at the home learning environment, we'd build relationships with the parents, we'd get the fire service to come out and sort that fire that's not operating right. Who's actually going out into the homes of a gambler to see what's going on there? Who are the affected others? Yeah? We have to do something about reaching out to those families and getting into those homes and building relationships and seeing what's actually going on. So I'm really excited that the white paper are talking about affordability checks, but it's not actually saying how it's going to do it. And I think within there has to be some kind of face-to-face work with people. And do you know, the operators know, when I was gambling, they knew that I live at 41 whatever street. Yeah, they could have passed it to somebody and somebody could have come and helped me, or somehow, how could they have helped me? And I think affordability checks are an opportunity for us to find out who the affected others are, and that's how we can reach the children as well. So we're not real. Of course, I'm interested in the adults, but I am really interested in the children. What's the impact on the children? How are we going to get to the children through the adults? You've got to involve the parents. You can't. Whilst we do a lot of work with children individually, they have very little power around the purse strings. We've got to get into those families' homes. We've got to find out that, Fred doesn't have a bed to sleep in. Ronnie. You'll see Ronnie today somewhere, find Ronnie. But Ronnie, he's an NHS, he was in our group, he's a school nurse. And he was talking about sleep. And he was talking about, Claire, you were talking about your son who doesn't sleep. And he was talking about if you don't sleep partway through the night, the stuff around your emotions can't be replaced or whatever if you miss that part in your sleep. Listen, I'm not a sleep practitioner, but I want to learn about it. But I'm saying we have to get into those homes and we have to find out what's going on in that house. I don't know how we're going to do it, but I think that's a solution.
Thank you, Wendy. Just echoing what Wendy said, I think there's a massive factor in terms of basically what's going on at home. And in terms of adolescents gambling, it depends, which age range we want to actually think of it from, really. My gambling started as a teenager on the school playground, playing money up the wall, not knowing what gambling was. Anytime we were interrupted by the teachers, we'll try to pick up the coins and run, and we just used to wonder, why on earth are they interrupting our private game? It's our money. We never understood that. But growing up, of course, having experienced, gambling harms properly and fully, I learned and I discovered that sometimes peer gambling could be one of the most ruthless forms of gambling, I should say. One is they're your friends and they're your peers, but you use the company with them as an opportunity to make money off them. Now, how distorted is that? And, this is an activity which I was engaging in. And now, interestingly, looking back now, most of my peers who I gambled with were usually all from working class backgrounds. And we can actually now, as adults, have conversations and draw links between the financial pressures of the household and sometimes us having a sense of belief that we're making something of ourselves. So is that those kind of attitudes that we need to actually basically try to address and have those open conversations with younger people? Because even still nowadays, looking back, I didn't feel as if basically anyone understood me. And it's about getting that level of understanding. And it's about, giving younger people a chance to kind of express themselves and actually letting them know without any kind of penalty or punishment that they can actually be open with adults or with any services to help them kind of engage. And well, they're the experts, they hold all the secrets, they're the gatekeepers of this, how basically it works and how it actually impacts their social life. I know children who actually go to their friend's house and they play a game of FIFA, and I think FIFA was mentioned earlier on, and it always has to be associated with some form of bet. So peer gambling is something which is quite prevalent amongst adolescents, and is about having that understanding and actually inviting them to the conversation and see how we can actually work together with younger people and see what we can actually do to kind of tackle and address this situation. And I think most importantly, everybody wants to basically find ways of actually existing or coping with their existence. And when we're younger, we feel as if basically our opportunities are limited because we're not allowed to drink and smoke. And anything else that we can get our hands onto, which is a vice or which could be something which is a bit out of, let's say, for example, out of play, we will try to basically do that. So it's about having that understanding. And I think we'll go further in terms of doing so, trusting ourselves to actually engage with the younger population and actually allowing ourselves to actually learn from their experiences. And I think we'll go further.
Thank you. Questions from the audience?
Hi guys, my name's Dave Jones. I work on the Welsh Gambling Education Hub down in Wales, obviously. My question is for Stephen. It's relating back to what you touched on in terms of the prison provisions earlier. Where I work more based within a training side of things on that educational and preventative side of things. We sit on the continuum alongside the treatment services as well. Do you think there is more opportunity for education services to go into prisons, or do they need more treatment services or treatment options within prisons, or a combination of both, I suppose, is where my question lies. Is there a more specific need over the other, or a sort of bespoke working package of both to go in together?
Thank you for your question. And I'll say it's the latter. I think it's the combination of both. What I learned and I discovered that people, when in prisons, having already had experiences of gambling-related harms or already been addicted to gambling, and some people picked up gambling whilst they were in prisons. So whether that be playing pool, playing cards, and these attitudes, came with them inside prisons or they were developed inside the prisons. I think that should be compulsory, really. What I do remember is that lessons around maths, English, drugs and alcohol awareness was all there as an option. And it was an opportunity for people to get out of their cells. This is one of the reasons why people signed up to these classes. Now, if we had something in place like gambling awareness, which was perhaps, compulsory or came with some form of incentive to actually encourage people to engage, I think we'll go further. We'll go quite far. I'm not being critical here of the prison system, but I'm just highlighting, some of the things which are missing. Now, one of the reasons why I was the lead for gambling and debt is because of my lived experience and because it's something which I'm passionate about. When I actually brought the conversation higher up to see if this is a provision that we can actually basically put in place, nobody was listening, nobody was responding, nobody was answering. And I think it's just that, lack of care. And I think if there was more lived experience voices, kind of sharing that experiences, echoing basically this need that, you just mentioned, I think we will go further. So I think it's about that collective response from lived experience groups as well and from, interested others. And so, yeah, I'll say it's completely crucial. It's fundamental that we have a provision or even, let's say, a policy like this in place where everyone who actually goes through the criminal justice can be screened, and they'll have maybe a soft kind of lesson or session and awareness on gambling related harms. It happens with drugs and alcohol. Some prisons, their regime is really strict. You may not suffer from the issue or experience the issue, but they know very much that drugs and alcohol, drugs especially, is highly prevalent in prisons. So therefore they make it their mission to do something about it. Why they haven't actually recognized gambling as something or an issue that needs to be addressed or done about, the question and the verdict's still out there for me. So if anyone ever has the answer, please let me know. I'll be really interested in knowing. But yeah, thank you for your question.
Thank you for your answer.
We've likely got just time for one further question. Did I see a hand back there?
I'd just like to sort of answer the question, that the challenge that Stephen just put out there. Why do prisons allow it? As Stephen will be aware, gambling is a prohibited thing in prisons, but the reason why gambling is allowed to happen in prison is because it's seen as being a pacifying activity. The prison management don't see any harm in people participating in gambling, even though, take Stephen's example, when he's talking about when he's playing sort of puggy, playing with the coins in the playground. In prison, a lot of people who do gamble don't necessarily go in gambling, but because they want to, if you want to associate with a peer group, in prison you get various levels, if you want, notoriety and power within a prison structure. And you often find that people who are, if you want, slightly lower down the tier of criminality, will try to sort of make friends with people higher up by getting involved in activities such as playing poker games or playing pool or whatever. And it can become a way of people getting involved in serious debt as well in prison. The effects and consequences of getting into debt in prison aren't just to do with money. They're to do with influence, they're to do with forcing people's families into sort of smuggling contraband into prisons to cover prison debt to save the sort of threats of violence that come across them. The question earlier to that was about education in prison. The thing about prison, and it really doesn't get enough, if you want, attention paid to it, is when you think about somebody who's affected by gambling or even any addiction, a lot of the problems they encounter trying to break free from addiction is the environmental circumstances they're in. They're surrounded by an environment that's sort of feeding and enabling and facilitating their addiction. Whereas when they get into prison, it actually creates a controlled environment. But for some people, that can be the first safe environment they've ever been in. I mean, you think of prison as not being a safe place, but for some people, the prison cell, the idea of the door shutting and nobody can get in at you is actually a very safe place for them. It gives them a chance to actually, if you want, freedom to examine themselves, to concentrate on, focus on themselves. And that's where we should be talking about education in prison. We should be looking at ways in which the time, if you want, the opportunity of taking somebody away from the environment that causes the chaos in their life, to allow them to sort of create self-development and sort of introspection. That's where prison and sort of gambling and any addiction, that's where the benefits should be focused on.
Thank you for that. That was very informative. Thank you. I really appreciate that. So I did a piece of research and some work with Penal Reforms Solution, where a group of peers, about 3 or 4, were actually not employed, but given a task to do surveys to actually get a grasp of what prison culture was like and how gambling was very much engraved in prison culture. It's interesting that it was residents who took it upon themselves to actually take the responsibility and learn about this. And I think it's fantastic. I think it's really great we did that. But what interests me and what surprises me is that not only prison officers, but other services who are working within prisons, whose responsibilities is to actually make sure they mitigate issues as such, are not really, well, excuse my French, pulling their finger out and doing something about it. I mean, I've started volunteering in prison since 2017. And this culture amongst staff, amongst members who are responsible for kind of identifying some of these issues. And of course, I respect that sometimes it's a pacifying element of actually being in prison, but it leads to further troubles down the line. It leads to reoffending. So in a sense, so something which is actually supposed to keep the peace leads to more trouble, especially when the person's being released from prison. And I want to talk about, any through the gate support that, that's not there really. And I think that there's a lot to be said about that. So when it comes to basically probation services, when it comes to what prisons are supposed to be for rehabilitation, it doesn't really basically, how do I say it, serve the purpose. And I think it's something that we need to basically look at. So going back to the example which I was given, the project which I did with the Penal Reform Solutions. So these 3 or 4 individuals found a lot about prison culture, so many things which you highlighted, if anything more, in terms of basically the debt that's accrued from people who actually engage in gambling, the fact that now their families and relatives, are being blackmailed and are being threatened to kind of bring contraband in, which is leading to further criminality. And I think perhaps we're on the same page here, so this is what I'm talking about in terms of the voices who are not being heard. So people who are actually inadvertently being caught in the crossfire of different cultures within gambling, which leads to further harms and which leads to further criminality and which leads to, well, more or less societal, decline, really. So that's something, which I'm passionate about. And, thank you very much for highlighting, all of these facts. And it's something which I can actually resonate to. And yeah, I think we need to do something more about it. But in terms of the things which I'm highlighting, I'm not calling anybody out, but I just say, in my mind, that in terms of basically service provisions within prison culture, within staff members, I think it needs to be improved. I think systemically, there's a lot that needs to happen. I think we need some form of reform when it comes to basically provisions within prison services. I really do. And it may come across strong, but being in the environment for years on end and actually having colleagues, who are not doing the due diligence or doing the basics and allowing people to fall to the wayside is, I take, really personal, and I think it's completely wrong. But thank you so very much for that information. I've, definitely become, more educated and less ignorant about, my views and things. But yeah, that's what I have to say about it. Thank you.
I think nothing remains now. We've just got time to wrap up. So I'll thank our panelists so much for your really engaging insights and our audience for this fantastic discussion. I hope if you have anything further that you'd like to discuss with our panelists or with Fast Forward about this, please speak up. and get in touch after the session. Thanks very much.